Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Another exciting show, another exciting guest. Today, we're going to talk about one woman's journey into a dark place. Let's call it what it is, alcoholism. And her quest to come out of it. And not only come out of it, but to come out of it with a purpose, that beast mindset to touch the hearts of other individuals. Let's call it what it is. Truly a beautiful story. I had the pleasure of doing a pre-interview with her, and it it touched me just to hear just a fraction of the story. So um, to even go deeper, to know that she's also an entrepreneur, she's also a mother, she's also a happily married wife with two stepchildren. So out of all that pain and suffering, beautiful, a rainbow appeared. Let's call it what it is, a rainbow appeared. So without further ado, let's welcome to the show, Miss Desiree Alford, all the way from, I'm going to get this right, Black Diamond, Washington.
That's right. Thank you for having me.
Such a great story. But before we get into the story in depth, tell the viewers a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, I was born and raised on the west coast of Washington and grew up in a family that my dad was an entrepreneur from the age of 18. And so I always had kind of that entrepreneurial blood in me.
Right.
Knew I'd always have my own business, but didn't really know how that would work out. I ended up moving to Southern California and went to college and really I studied fashion design and then I went to business school. And my career life went a different direction. I ended up in the food and beverage industry, wasn't passionate about it, but life happened and I ended up getting pregnant at the age of 29, very unexpectedly, not the way I thought my life was going to go. I always dreamed of being married and having kids, and I found myself single and pregnant, and knowing that if I had this baby, I was going to have to raise this child on my own and figure out how I was going to provide. And honestly, I can say now it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I had gotten sober 9 months prior to getting pregnant, so I was just getting my life back together. And I believe the gift of my pregnancy was it was the next thing that was going to point me in the direction that my life should be going. And at the birth of my daughter, I just started making hair accessories for fun for her, and people started asking where I got them. And I had this strong desire that once I was a mother, I didn't want to leave her side. I knew I was her only parent and I needed to find a way to provide and be present in her life. And so I started kind of just a leap of faith. I quit my job, started making hair accessories, thought this will last for a month or two. I'll probably run out of money. I'll go find another job. And the business took off. And within a couple years, we are in about 300 retail locations. That business got us our first house and really built our foundation where I could give my daughter a beautiful life while being present and staying home with her. And I still have that business to this day, Hearts and Pearls. We have a full apparel line now. But about 3 years ago, I really had that entrepreneurial just fire of like, I'm ready for something new. I knew something was stirring in my heart. And this time around, it was building something that my heart was passionate about and something that I overcame and struggled with years. And now I wanted to find a way to help other people. And so I launched West Coast Wellness, which is a coaching business that helps people overcome anything in their life that is a roadblock that they keep repeating certain cycles. They can't just find themselves hitting that wall over and over again. And so I use my journey with getting sober. And what I found with getting sober was that alcoholism was just a root of was a symptom of my problem, and I need to figure out what's really going on underneath that. And so I went on this journey to figure out what's going on, launched West Coast Wellness based off of that, helping people get to the root of their issues, and just been having an incredible time helping other people bring their life to the next level.
Let's go back a little bit. You mentioned um, alcoholism. You mentioned a lot of key factors that got you to this point. You go to the West Coast, you go to college, so forth. When did you recognize that there was an alcohol problem with you? Because if I'm hearing you correctly, you had this prior to having your child.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. For me, because I've done so much work around this, I knew I was an alcoholic when I was 17 years old. I started drinking when I was 13, and when the first time I had a drink, it felt like my answer, and it solved a lot of things for me. It took that edge off. It allowed me to socialize. It allowed a lot. They say with alcoholism, it often works for you until it doesn't. And so there was a lot of things that alcohol helped me with until it became a problem. And I remember being a junior in high school, knowing I was an alcoholic. And my parents actually told me. I knew it. And then they actually said, "You're an alcoholic." And so I struggled. It wasn't until 11 years after that, so 17, I was 28, that I ended up getting sober. And it was a battle. It was me constantly trying to cut it out of my life or find ways to lessen it. And it ended up destroying my life, really. I had to hit rock bottom until I gave it up.
Hold that thought on hitting rock bottom because we're gonna go there too. Let's go back. Did your family have a history of alcoholism?
Yeah, so my parents didn't, but on both sides of my family, I had family members on both sides of my family, dad and mom's side, that had problems with alcohol. And there's five kids in my family, and many of us have struggled with alcohol.
You said you recognized it when you was 17. People
Hmm.
people in your family recognized that you was having issues. Recognizing and doing something about it is two different things. So I guess my question is, how do you treat someone in your family, like your daughter, if mom and dad or whatever, if you also are an alcoholic? And I'm assuming that they didn't address their own issues. So if how could they help you, even though they see it? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, so my parents weren't active drinkers at the time that, they let me know that, "Desiree, you're an alcoholic." I had already been thinking I had a something. I knew I was something with had a problem with alcohol based off of how I drank in comparison to my peers. I had never I noticed by the age of 17, I'd never been able to just have one drink and stop, or two drinks and stop. That the moment I drank, I had to keep drinking until I either blacked out or passed out. And I had so many friends that could stop drinking, and it kind of blew my mind. Like, that's crazy. Like, they have some sort of a control that I don't.
When I knew a young lady that did that, and it really shocked me because I was like, how do you drink until you black out and don't remember? Like what kind of gratification could that be? But more important, let's go back to you.
Yeah.
You mentioned you drink until you blah 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 or you black out. What were some of the problems you was dealing with that even got you to the bottle at such a young age?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Um, this is one of the things I do in my coaching is help people identify the root problem. And for me, my problem really comes from a story out of second grade. And it'll make me emotional, because it's still very um, a powerful story, but now I use it to help me. Um, so in second grade, I grew up in a family with four siblings, five of us kids. We had a fun family. My parents were amazing. My dad had several businesses, and my dad was my hero. did not see any greater man in my life. My dad was my hero. But in second grade, they sat us down for a family meeting and my world turned upside down. My dad told us that he had cheated on my mom and got his secretary pregnant. And the child was actually 6 years old at the time. And we knew this child. My mom had babysat this child, and he was my brother. But I'm finding this out by the time the child's 6 years old. And for my little brain, I didn't know how to process that. Um,
How old were
I
you? How old were you?
I was in second grade,
So you was probably like maybe
so
five,
eight, eight,
eight.
probably eight
Okay.
years old. Yeah, 8 years old. Um, and so because I can process this properly, my brain processed it this way. It said to me, if I was good enough, my dad wouldn't have chose to leave our family. I looked at it as that way, that there was something wrong with me, that I must have, I must not be good enough. He chose to leave our family and go find what he needed outside of that. And I really, from the age, from second grade, if I look at my life was very bright. And then when I found out about my dad, it just turned really dark and I got confused. I didn't feel like I knew my dad. I felt like I was living a lie and I now saw him as someone I couldn't trust. And it really hurt me. And I went really internal. I didn't really verbalize these things. And that's why at the age of 13, when I drank, it felt like for the first time I could be honest and real with what I felt and I could talk to people. I struggled intensely with anxiety. And I think part of that was trying to hide and put up this facade that we had this beautiful family, and really it was falling apart at the seams.
How did it affect your other siblings?
We're all very different. My sister, who's a year and a half younger than me, is very verbal. She communicates her thoughts, and she got all of her anger and her communication out. You know, over the next couple years, she said whatever she wanted to my dad, and I think a part of me was like, man, I wish I could communicate like that. And
Mm.
then, each sibling kind of had their own way of navigating it, but it affected us all.
When did when did you address this with your dad? When did you get the burden off of your chest?
I over the years, I would say from second grade to being in college, I remember multiple times trying to have conversations based off of what I knew I needed to communicate. But looking back, I know now I went about it not the right way. But every conversation I went with to my dad was me going to it, wanting him to change, and me not accepting him for who he was,
Mm-hmm.
right? We all do things that are wrong. We all fall short, right? We all sin. And I'm not saying what he did was right, but I was constantly trying to put him back into what I believed he was prior to what this happened, and he was never going to become that. Um, and so, really, to be completely honest, it wasn't until geez, 2017. In
Mm.
2017, my dad got diagnosed with ALS, and he was told he had 14 months to live. And I was the first child he called to tell. And the reason why I believe he called me was because I did so much work in getting sober. And one of the things I focused on was healing my relationship with my dad and having communication and not cutting off communication just because I'm uncomfortable or sad or upset, but finding ways to talk about whatever it was that came up. And so at the time when he called me and told me, um, obviously I was devastated and I couldn't believe he only had 14 months to live. But at the same time, I was like, I'm so glad I maintained this relationship, even though it was really difficult for me.
Mm.
But it wasn't until he was literally on his deathbed that I feel like I got to have those conversations that my heart really needed to have. And it took him really facing death to open up and be honest. And and finally kind of say some of the things that I was looking for him to say years ago that he was never able to say.
What were those things that he shared? The things that he said that you wish he had said earlier.
Just humbly acknowledging he had caused some pain. I felt prior to that, when I brought it up, I almost annoyed him and made him upset, that it was almost like, Desiree, why are we talking about this again? But it was that time when he really, he couldn't even get out of bed, he couldn't move, that he was humble and he was apologetic and he was emotional, and he was able to finally say some of these things that really meant the world to me. And at that point, it's funny, I didn't need them anymore because I'd done my own healing, and I'd finally got to the place that, like, Desiree, if you don't accept, until you accept your dad for who he is, you know, you're never going to truly have that relationship. You need to let go of who you think he is and love him for who he actually is. And so when we got to have that conversation, it wasn't out of necessity anymore. It was perfect timing, that, like, wow, and I get to have these conversations that I really wanted when I was, you know, a young girl.
Were there resentments to the new brother?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of confusion. You know, me and my siblings were really tight, and you know, when you grow up in a family, you're all kind of reflections of one another. You're into the same things. And he was just, you know, I felt like he was different from us, and obviously it was odd because now we had to build a relationship with him when we had already known him. He'd been a part of our life, but not as a sibling. And so it was really, yeah, there was resentment.
How did you get over that? Like, how did you? And I get it, trust me. But how do you mend it? How long did it take to mend and to really accept that he was a byproduct of a situation that you guys had no control over?
Yeah, you know, my mom really helped me with that at a young age. My mom's grace and forgiveness towards my dad, and at one point we took my brother in. That was a result of an affair. And it was at that moment that I saw my mom in such a light that was like, wow, she's willing to kind of take this mess and step in and help out this child because she knows it's what's best for this child. She's putting other things aside.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, honestly, it wasn't until I got sober. I had a lot of work to do on so many relationships in my life. And so it wasn't until I got sober that probably that true healing came for me, to let go of a lot of resentment around the whole situation.
You mentioned so many relationships in your life. Like, what were some of the catastrophic things that was taking place in all the relationships that you was having that eventually you got to wake up and say, like, you know what, this isn't healthy.
Yeah, you know, for me, I mean, and any alcoholic, we use alcohol to numb everything. So we don't feel any of our feelings. We use it to celebrate. We use it because we're bored. We use it because we're sad, depressed, you know, just to pass time. And so what started to happen was I became a totally different person. I was just a shadow of the true person that I was. And so any relationships I did have weren't built out of trust and honesty. They were really I didn't even know how to have a committed relationship. I couldn't put anything together that meant this is a true relationship. So I did a lot of damage. You know, I hurt a lot of people. And that's when you know, when I got sober, I got to do a lot of work around that and make amends and truly start to step into who I am.
How do you hurt a lot of people with your actions? That's I never heard that. I heard it, but I never heard nobody say how did they hurt them. Like, how did you hurt the people?
You know, uh in my drinking days, geez, I don't think I had a relationship that I could be committed in. I was unfaithful. I was not trustworthy, you know? So I hurt a lot of people by being someone that could not be trusted. I mean, everything under the sun. I just was not someone that I think back to like right now. Um, if I want to go take my nieces for a ride in my car, there's no thought in my sister's mind that she doesn't trust me. 15 years ago, no one in their life would have let me take a child in my car. I
Mm.
was not a safe person to be around.
Let's go back a minute. Excuse me. Let's go back a minute. Now you get pregnant,
Yeah.
but you're still dealing with alcohol issues while you're in college as well, correct?
Yep.
But you get pregnant. Uh, Was he also an alcoholic, the father?
Yeah, so I actually got pregnant when I was 9 months sober. So I'd gotten sober, and got pregnant, and I got, yeah, he was a recovering alcoholic, and I got pregnant.
And I never understood this. Maybe you can shed some light on it. I'm not a alcoholic. I know the work that you guys have to go through with AA and so forth, but it appears that a lot of those times when they're in these classes, you guys get attracted to each other. Is it almost like a time bomb waiting to explode?
That's a good way to say it. When you first get sober, and AA was the foundation of me getting sober. I spent the first 8 years of my sobriety in the rooms of AA. And they have little things like, you shouldn't get in a relationship in the first year of sobriety because you're literally still detoxing. Your brain is still detoxing off of alcohol, and you're not making decisions that are right for you. So that's why they're like, wait until to get into a relationship. Don't move it within the first year. So yeah, it's you know, could set someone up for really bad situation to be getting sober and then be in a room with so many different other people that are trying to get sober and are recovering alcoholics as well.
Did you have a relapse?
No, never had a relapse.
How did the pregnancy, knowing that he still had his issues, what did he bring to the table? I mean, did he have any um you got a child now,
Yeah.
and you basically are you ever really cured when you have alcohol problems, but you're doing the work. What was
Hmm.
that like now, knowing that he had an issue, and now you guys have a child together, and now you got to raise a child? 'Cause you said he's not involved in the child's life.
No, he's not. And, I want to be careful about this subject for
Right, right,
definitely for my daughters, and anything publicly talking about him. I never want to paint him in a bad light.
right.
But, off the record, by the time I found out I was pregnant, I'd already quit talking to him because he had had a relapse. And
Okay.
so I knew he wasn't someone I should be around. I let him know I was pregnant, and he just wasn't at a point in his life that he was ready to be a father. And, um, as far as I know, to this day, he has not been able to. I don't know. I won't say anything about that. I don't know anything about his life, but
Mm.
he has never met her, and I have really just focused on being what I can be for my daughter and having the real conversations with her. So she's very aware
Hmm.
of what the truth is. It was one thing I wanted to make sure. I didn't want to ever blindside her with some huge thing like what happened to me and made me feel like, what reality do I live in? So I've been very honest with her. She knows what the truth is. And every once in a while, she'll ask me questions and I answer them to the best of my ability.
I like the way you said that, and believe me, I didn't want you to throw anybody up under the bus, especially when it comes to parenting on male or female side. We always need to make sure that we protect our children, and I like the way you did that and answering that question. So moving forward, you wind up when you start to see your life transform. Did when you let's go back a minute, go back a little bit more. Let's go back to your dad,
Yeah.
because that's when a lot of this stuff really started to take place. You made amends with your father. He wound up passing. How do you put your life together now? Because how long did you grieve? Because that's still your father, no matter how you look at it, and you're still dealing with your stuff. How did all the transformations begin to take place for you?
I mean, so when by the time my dad passed away, so he passed away in 2018. I'd been sober for 8 years.
Great.
So I had done a lot of healing. And honestly, for me, and when I talk to my siblings about this, they can agree. We are so thankful that we had like um knowledge that okay, he has 14 months to live. Some people just get a call that their dad's gone. And so I really utilized those 14 months um to make memories with him. And
Mhm.
that's what I did. We had like even to the point when he couldn't get out of bed, we had slumber parties and pizza parties, and I took that opportunity to spend time with him.
When you talk about recovering, you did 8 years. Congratulations, you're 15 years sober. What was at least three of the most difficult parts of the recovery process for you? Was it dealing well, not dealing with your father, but what was at least three of the things that you share in your transformation class, your wellness class?
Yeah, I think the very first thing is we all have we all have internal stories that we're believing. Excuse me. We all have internal stories that we're believing, and 90% of them aren't truth. They're based out of some lie that we've just chosen to believe. So, for example, for me to start to create a belief in second grade that I wasn't good enough
Mm-hmm.
really then played out in my life in so many ways that pushed me into alcoholism, that pushed me into things to try to gain value.
Mm-hmm.
And what I needed to do was to eventually what I did, I got sober, but what I needed to do was slow down and really analyze what's going on internally with my thoughts, what's leading me to these behaviors, instead of just looking at the alcohol. Because, yes, the alcohol was the problem, but the real problem was my internal stories and what I believed about myself and life. So that's number one. Number two is being able to reframe those stories. So taking those internal stories, me believing that I'm not good enough, and reframing it to what truth is, and being able to tell myself, you are good enough. You are amazing. You're alive. You're well. You have so many accomplishments. And Desiree, you have the power to create whatever life you want. Just go after it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, really being able to be my own cheerleader. And the last thing is no one's going to do it for you. Like I hear all these people like I can only, for example, working out. I can only work out if I have a workout partner, or I can only go on a diet or eat healthy if my husband does it with me, or I
Mm-hmm.
can only do this if this certain thing is right. And it's like the moment you're thinking like that, you've already failed. And so this belief and knowing that no one else is going to do it for you, and if you want it bad enough, get up and do it. Like this life is amazing, and we actually have so much more control over it than we realize. If we focus on the controllables and we take control of those things, we can alter our whole entire life. And then from there, letting go of the uncontrollables, letting go and just saying, I have zero control over that. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to focus on what I can control and nothing else.
Wow, that's pretty powerful how you put all that into words.
Thank
I,
you.
I pretty much say that all the time to people. Like, why are you concerned about something that you can't control? Like, why are you letting it take over 90% of your thoughts?
Yep.
And people do that every day. So how did the idea of creating West Coast Wellness come in to the picture?
It came on really early in my sobriety. I remember thinking about year 3 of my sobriety, like I had literally transformed my life. Like if you would have known me during my drinking days and then saw this transformation, you would have been like, there's no like it's night and day. And so I saw my life transforming, and it had very little to do with actually taking the alcohol out and more to do with the internal work I was doing. And I remember saying out loud about 3 years into sobriety, the whole world needs this because every single one of us on planet Earth has some sort of a addiction, some sort of a bad habit that we're turning to because we need to numb ourselves because we can't handle what the truth is.
Mm.
And if we can learn how to heal what's going on underneath and really be able to live free and awake to the world, like it's life changing. And so it was just this knowing of like, oh my gosh, the whole world needs this.
You mentioned that everybody has something that numbs them.
Yeah.
Your numbing was it abandonment or was it self worth
Yeah, I think initially where I got off was not knowing,
or
yeah, my value.
validation? Was it all three or was it all
Yeah,
three?
not knowing my value, and then obviously because I didn't know my value, I had to turn to something to be able to feel better about myself, and that was alcohol. And and the reason why I knew right away that like, wow, alcohol is really not the problem is because I got sober and naturally my mind was looking for things to just take the pain away. I hadn't felt real feelings in so long. I was like, this is overwhelming. I need something. And that's when it was like, no, you need to heal what's going on, or you're going to be this constant person that's turning to, drugs, alcohol, food, shopping, porn, spending money, whatever it might be, social media, right?
Hmm.
And I didn't want that for myself.
How do you determine in your class? Is your class
Oh, I
more
think I don't hear you. I think you're muted.
okay? Can you hear me? Can you hear
Nope,
me?
I'm still don't hear you.
Can you hear me? Our audio's great on our end. You can't hear her? One, two, three,
Now.
four. Can you
There
hear me?
you go.
Can you hear me?
Okay, I hear it now. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So my question was, is your wellness class more of an addiction reprogramming class?
That's a great question. So, when I started to have the desire to create a business, I knew the focus was on addiction and rehealing, but I also knew there's no way I could sell a program like that. There's no one on planet Earth that's going to be like, sign me up. I'm an addict. But I knew if I could reframe it into uh, right there, I reframed it. Reframed it in a way that I knew it would attract people. So I focus on sustainable weight loss and overcoming addictions. And really, once you get into my program, you realize like anybody that's overweight or hasn't been able to have any success or consistency with weight loss, it is an addiction issue. They are addicted to food. They've been using food to numb, and really they just have to relearn how to fuel their body and then also have other mechanisms to turn to instead of food. And so we dig deep and we get to the root of the issue. And so I, have set it up where I focus on sustainable weight loss, but through that, then I get a lot of people that become aware of how much they're drinking and how much they're drinking is the problem. If I sold the program as I'm going to get you sober, no one, I knew as an alcoholic, I didn't want anybody telling me I needed to quit drinking or you have this. It's like, no way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to go about it in a way that they find it themselves. So you get them on a program that actually, our detox, you can't drink for 7 days.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess how many people realize they have a problem with alcohol in 7 days because they're like, well, holy shit, that was hard. Only 7 days and I wanted to drink really bad. So I've had so many people realize they've had problems with, alcohol because of the program. And then I've been able to help them through that.
Do the people that come to you that have the alcohol problem and the food addiction, do they recognize that it's the alcohol that's causing it?
No, not initially. No, it takes work and digging, and it's a layering process because I can't just come out and I mean, I know by talking to a client if they have an alcohol problem or not, but if I just went out and said, like, you're an alcoholic, that's you can't do that. They need to, alcoholism is a self-diagnosed disease.
Hmm.
It's not until you realize you're an alcoholic that you're actually okay, I'm an alcoholic, because you can push that on somebody, but if they don't believe it, it doesn't matter. They're not going to get help. But through the program, it's this process of kind of peeling back the onion layers. We're really looking at ourselves. I have this kind of like this 7-step process that gets people to the core of their issues, and it's can be really uncomfortable for people, but what comes out in that is they're realizing all these things that have maybe pushed them to food, right, to numb, or push them to alcohol, or push them to a shopping addiction, or whatever it might be, social media.
So you really in the wellness class address addictive personality disorders and the things that handicap them from becoming their ultimate self. More.
Exactly. But I don't sell it like that because people, they don't want to be labeled as an addict or an addictive person.
Hmm.
But yes, that is exactly what I do.
What other kind of addictions are you seeing in your in your business? Which is, if you had to rank them like from one, two, three, four, what are some of the addictions that you're seeing? Because I think people need to know this, that
Yeah. Yeah,
there
no,
there
that's a
is a
great
scale,
question.
there is a scale, so to speak.
Yeah, sorry, I have this weird shadowing going on. So if you see that in the camera, I'm trying to figure out where that shadowing's coming from.
Okay.
Anyway, it might be from my backlight. So anyway, so to answer your question, the number one thing I see that's like the most evident one that people are first to kind of admit because it's not that embarrassing is social media. Um, Scrolling on their phone, mindlessly scrolling, right? They know they should be doing other things, but they just wasted 2 hours, scrolling on their phone. Um, laying in bed and scrolling on their phone, and now they're staying up till like their plan was to go to bed at 10 p.m. and now it's 1 a.m. and they're scrolling on their phone. So scrolling on their phone, social media has been a huge one. Food, obviously, food addiction, addiction to sugar is, I would say, I mean, this is going to be stunning when I say this, but I think 90% of Americans are addicted to sugar and they don't even realize it. And it
Mm.
isn't until they take it out that they realize, well, wow, like it's my, like I could talk about this stuff forever because I've altered my life through nutrition and wellness and fitness. And so that's why I have West Coast Wellness. It's a custom fitness program for individuals based off of their specific goals, custom nutrition based off of their specific goals, and then the mindset piece. And the reason why I think that's so important is because nutrition alone, is such a huge factor in our mental health, because of where, this probably from your past being in the industry, that the way we eat affects us, and
Yeah.
um, our gut microbiome alone, right? All the studies over the last 10 years that are finally coming out that, like, oh, 90% of your serotonin's made in your gut, 40% of your dopamine. And so what you eat helps you produce those hormones and has such an effect on your mental health. So from, sugar addiction, then alcoholism, is a huge one. And then it's like little, addictions like that come after that are shopping addiction, online shopping, buying things to make us feel better because we don't like how we feel. So those are the top ones.
What about overall fitness, health, addictions? I mean, some people can take that to the extreme too.
Hey,
There is.
100%. And you might be able to, some people could say, Desiree, that's your new addiction. And you know what? I'd be like, I'd way rather have that addiction than the ones I've had in the past. And one of the things they teach you in AA is, hey, you're gonna take the drinking away, but you have to purposely replace it with something else, because if you don't, you will replace it. So pick your replacement. And I could literally go over the years and say there was times that I used other things, never drugs or alcohol, But it was a layering process where, there was a time that I had an addiction to Diet Coke. And I used that until it was like, okay, I don't like this. This isn't good for me. How can I then kind of layer up and go to the next level? And, if my addiction is health and wellness, fitness, nutrition, I'm okay with that because I'm 43 years old. I feel better than I ever have. I'm stronger than I've ever been, and my mental health is better than it's ever been. I was someone that had to go on anxiety and depression medicine at the age of 17, and I know now, well, it's because I was drinking so much. I wasn't taking care of myself. And now that I'm able to use exercise and food for my health, um, my life has transformed.
What are at least three things that you would recommend for people who may be suffering from some type of addiction to to s- to start their road to recovery?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, like they say, acknowledging, knowing you have a problem is the first step.
Hmm.
From there, you're going to need some support. You cannot do it alone. In any addiction, the internal story around addiction is keep it quiet, isolate, just get over it on your own. And you have to do the opposite. You have to have a support group, you have to have people around you for accountability. um, and you're gonna need that, there's because life is so hard when you're, especially that those first few months that you're pulling away whatever the numbing mechanism is, and now you have to like deal with every emotion. So getting the support for sure. You're going to need some help. Go get some professional, find somebody that has done it and gone before you, and get some help.
Last question before we wrap up. Congratulations on your marriage. Congratulations on your two handsome stepsons. How has life been for you now? Such a long journey, such tragic loss of your father. The rebonding and the with your new brother and stuff. How has all this changed your life now? What is life like for you?
You know, life is amazing. And I honestly wake up every single morning grateful for this life, because there was a time in my life that I wished the opposite. I barely wanted to live, and I could not stand the life I was living. Life is amazing, and it's truly what we make it. And today I have put together, I really have changed my life through changing my internal beliefs and going after things that were really important to me. Um, getting my daughter, I raised her until she was 4 on my own. And then got married when she was 5, and my husband adopted her. So she has a dad, and I gained 2 stepsons. They were 6 when we got married. They just turned 16. And I feel like the things that I went through in life were just to prepare me for the next battles, because there's always something. Like you've heard the saying, you're either in the middle of a battle, you're coming out of a battle, or you're about ready to go in one. And so life is an endless story of what's next. And we had so many struggles in the first couple years of our marriage. It was like I thought I went through enough. And that was just this reality that's like, that this is life, blending a family. Then my stepson getting diagnosed with leukemia 2 months before we got married. And we spent the next 4 years at Seattle Children's Hospital. And, in the midst of this is when my dad gets diagnosed with ALS, and then he dies. And then me and my husband find out we can't have kids. It was just so many things,
Mm.
and it makes me thankful for the work that I've done, that through that all, I never had to turn to alcohol. I never had to turn to anything, but I could live gritty and raw and feel the emotions and get angry, but heal and come out the other side and just be like, man, this is an incredible life we get to live. And I can't wait to just wake up tomorrow and experience this all over again. So, one thing I tell myself is I'm not living on planet Earth to be comfortable. I'm living to be able to feel every emotion that comes my way. And anger and pain is not a bad thing. Like, it's part of humanity. So if we quit having this idea that it's bad to feel pain or anger or sadness or depression, and we just accept it as like, this is life, then it just feels like it's part of the process. And, you know, the whole saying of what we resist persists. It's like it takes that magnifying glass off of it, and it really makes me have a better perspective on life.
And you definitely have a better perspective of life just even listening to you talk right now. My hat's off to you for such a beautiful story, for definitely making an impact in everybody's life through your own personal journey. How can the viewers reach out to you, know more about your business?
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram at westcoastwellness.co. I That's where I communicate with all my, a lot of people find me through that way. I also have a website called shopwestcoastwellness.com. So either way is great.
Thank you so much, Desiree, for
Thank
taking
you.
time out to come on the show, sharing, like I said, such a beast mindset story. I wish you all the best. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, another exciting guest, another exciting show. This has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.